I'm Dr. Jillian Lucas Baker. I'm a professor, a wife, and a mom, and I've struggled with fertility issues.
I'm Sonora Joy Allwood, a holistic nurse, health coach, entrepreneur, wife, and mom. And I've also struggled with fertility issues.
Welcome to A Tribe Called Fertility.
Dr. Shah, thank you so much for being with us today. And you are actually our first doctor that is on our show, so we really appreciate you being here.
Wow.
So for our listeners, I want to make sure we give you the proper shout out. So A Tribe Called Fertility, we are so grateful to have Dr. Neel Shah, who is an assistant professor of OBGYN and reproductive biology at Harvard Medical School and founding director of the Delivery Decisions Initiative at Harvard's Adrian Labs. His work focuses on partnering with people giving birth to design solutions that enable them to thrive. As an OBGYN at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston, Dr. Shah cares for patients at critical life moments that range from childbirth to primary care to surgery. And as a scientist and a social entrepreneur, Dr. Shah is listed among the 40th smartest people in healthcare by the Becker's Hospital Review, and he has been profiled by the New York Times, CNN, and other outlets. He has written more than 50 peer-reviewed academic papers and contributed to 4 books, and he's been a senior author of Understanding Value-Based Healthcare. So with no further ado, Dr. Neel Shah, welcome to A Tribe Called Fertility.
Yay! I mean, I'm like so honored to be the first doctor.
You are?
Yes, first MD. Yes.
MD. Yes, first
Yeah.
MD. That's right.
Yeah.
I'm suddenly feeling like I'm not doing enough in my life, by the way, after hearing that intro.
And we know that's not true.
Right.
So Dr. Shah, so to kick off our discussion today, can you share with us why C-sections are so high in the United States?
Yeah, sure. I mean, C-sections are so common. I mean, everybody knows somebody who's had one, and most of the people that we know seem like they're okay, and so we don't think much of it. But it turns out from the last generation to the current one, C-section rates have become 500% more common. 500%. So much so that it's the most common surgery that we perform on people. And we don't have a great explanation for why. I mean, the surgery is designed to rescue moms and babies. It's designed to save lives. But it turns out, you know, from the early 1970s to today, we went from a national C-section rate of 5% to a national C-section rate of 32%. So it's gone up by a lot. And it turns out term infants are 0% better off, 0%. And it also turns out that a mom today, this is a scary statistic, but unfortunately it's a true one. A mom today is 50% more likely to die in childbirth than her own mother was. So it's not just that we're doing so much more surgery to people that they might not need, but they're not better off, and actually in some ways they're worse off.
Wow.
What's interesting about what you just said, with all of the medical advancements that we have, that I would be more likely to die while giving birth than my mother was giving birth to me. That's startling. I just don't even understand.
This is real. And I hate it. I hate saying it. You know, I have a friend, Charles Johnson, who lost his wife, Kira, in childbirth a couple of years ago. And we've had an opportunity to do a couple of events together where we talk about this. And, you know, there are a number of people who come up to him afterwards, and particularly Black women for whom the risks are 3 to 4 times higher, and they're terrified, and it breaks my heart. But you can't fix what you're not seeing. So it starts by just calling it out.
Yes.
And this is something that we weren't talking about. I mean, those statistics have been true for a very long time, but we're just starting to talk about them.
So
Yeah.
Dr. Shah, with that said, why do you think that there has been a shift with this being talked about more and it being kind of more out there by the larger public?
That's a good question. I mean, with the mortality part in particular, we've been tracking it for about 25 years, and it's been going up for the whole 25 years. I just want to be clear, this is not like a recent phenomenon. It's been steadily going up. While it's been going down in sub-Saharan Africa, it's been going the opposite direction
Right.
of America.
That is insane.
And I think what did it, honestly, there's probably a couple different ways of telling the story. I think Charles has been relentless as a human being in just bravely reliving that trauma and sharing the story of what happened to him and his wife over and over and over again. And also, it took gumshoe journalism, honestly. Some amazing journalists, Nina Martin and Renee Montaigne, went to local newspaper obituaries and Facebook and counted. They wrote a series called Lost Mothers, and they counted the moms who died and they told their stories. And I think that led to more people like Serena Williams stepping up and say, well, this happened to me too. And I think that changed everything.
It definitely is the reason we created this platform. We're friends from school, middle school, and we just realized that we've all had experiences with fertility issues. Me and Jill had complicated births. We had C-sections, and we were like, this is kind of crazy that all three of us can come together on this issue. Why? We're all educated, we're all professionals, we all have great access to healthcare, and we couldn't understand it, and I guess for me, that's what it's hard for me to wrap my mind around, especially being a nurse and being a part of, the medical community. Like, I just don't understand why my people mainly are being affected when Black women are the most educated being in America right now, and we definitely have access to good healthcare. Why,
I mean, there's so many ways to try to unpack the why, and I'm on my own learning journey about this. It's forced me to. You're an RN, I'm an MD, and I think I provide good care, but like this forces self-reflection, and there's like this C-section. The thing about the C-sections is when I do a C-section, I'm always right, because if the baby comes out looking perfect, I'm like, well, it's a good thing I did a C-section. And if the baby comes out and has low APGAR scores, I'm like, see, it's a good thing I did a C-section. So it's pretty good to be me. I'm always right, and it's hard to reflect. And especially around the racial disparities, we're all taught that racism is evil. And so it's hard to recognize it in ourselves. But it turns out, like, I've had to learn that anti-Black racism is different from, I'm melanated, but I'm not a Black woman, and like, it's just different. I've learned that the institution of slavery and American medicine grew up at the same time. And it was the job of American physicians to commoditize human beings and their reproduction, to put price tags on people's bodies. And they did that on the basis of junk science. And that science hasn't gone away. Like, when a person has had a C-section the first time, they're allowed to have a normal labor the second time. And there's a calculator, a quantitative calculator that you use to predict people's chances of success. And if you're Black, you click that, and then it lowers your odds of success. And that's not based on biology. That's based on history, where, Black people have had less support during labor. So of course their C-section rates were higher.
So we know that you founded a couple of organizations, or co-founded Cost of Care and March for Moms. Can you tell us why maternal health disparities ended up being a focal point of your career, or what made you decide to get into this work?
Sure, Riel. If there's strange noises in the background, it could very well end up being my dog or my toddler. So I apologize.
I'm so sorry.
We all have kids.
No, it's good.
We all have kids, pets, something.
Yes.
We're talking about heavy topics, and at some point,
it's COVID life.
So, I mean, I guess personally, it wasn't necessarily what I intended to do. In my mid-20s as a dude in medical school, I thought OB/GYN was the last thing I'd ever do. And I never thought I would have a career that was at the intersection of gender equity and structural racism and reproductive justice, like spicy areas, you know. But I think I think the galvanizing motivation in cost of care and March for Moms and really everything that I've done was somewhere along the way realizing that uh, we treat people's experience of care as a luxury that you get to after you've made them safe. And my experience has been that we got that backwards. That actually it's through attending to people's lived and embodied experience that you make them safe. That's what the Serena Williams story tells me. When I look at maternal mortality reviews and what's going wrong at the end of the day, it's always a failure to hear people and to truly listen to them. So I don't know, I guess that's been my journey so far, and I'm still on it. Like I'm still trying to learn.
That's amazing. I really, it's like super poignant, and I think it puts into perspective, because I feel like a lot of times people get into certain avenues or niches because of a lived experience or something that they know someone close to them has lived. So it's refreshing to hear. And I think as a woman who's on the other end of that, or could potentially be, it's refreshing to hear that someone of your stature is taking an interest and really looking out for us in that regard.
You know,
Yeah, I second that. I second that.
It's hard. I mean, we live in a time of like, I'm going to just say it, like identity politics and tribalism. And so like, it's really hard to be empathetic with each other in every way. And like, you don't want to assume that like, because you do or you don't share an identity based on race or gender or sexual orientation, that you automatically know what the other person is. Like we all have a journey that we have to walk to truly empathize with people. But like to be honest with you, like all these statistics that I rattled off at the beginning shocked me. And I'd been a doctor for years. I delivered tens of thousands of babies before I ever knew that maternal mortality was going up.
Wow.
And so like a lot of this was like just trying to like understand why my practice of medicine didn't square with public health, and then realizing that like I'm not necessarily better than anybody. I'm part of the same system that's not working.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Shah, we are so grateful that you decided to take this route as a medical doctor and being a new professor to medical students. And that's how we were introduced to each other about a year and a half ago. I know that it's very hard for medical students to decide what they want to specialize in. So we are very grateful that you decided to go this route, because you're a true champion for us. So I did want to ask you, why do you value the role of nurses in particular to maternal health outcomes, and also just transdisciplinary approaches? Because I've read a lot of your work and your literature and also your research projects, and that's something that definitely stands out in your work compared to, I would say, other OB/GYN researchers. So why are those approaches important for you and for maternal mortality as a whole?
It's based on facts as much as philosophy. Nurses spend more time at the bedside than any other clinician. They are, in America, they do most of the labor support. You know, the physician, the OB/GYN, is usually not even in the hospital in most of America. The nurses are doing everything. And I think that any solution has to uplift and empower the people that are sitting with the patient. It turns out that when you think about what everybody deserves when they're giving birth, it's support and monitoring and coaching. That's like the basics that everybody benefits from. And then some people also benefit from our technology and medicine, and very few truly benefit from surgeons like me. But we've designed the system backwards. You take 99% of American women, put them in ICUs and surround them by surgeons, and then like forget about the support part. It doesn't make any sense. So I think you know, the fix has to be uplifting the people that are truly at the bedside, providing that support as a starting place. And then, you know, childbirth is a team sport. It just is. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a team sport from the beginning to the end, and
Yes,
it
it is.
continues to be
yeah.
with parenting. The same thing. But you know, I don't know personally in any of any of my deliveries with my children, I could not imagine not having nurses. And I'm not saying that because
Yeah.
Sonora is one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of nurses in my family. But really, I mean, they did everything and just
My
so
OB nurse was
compassionate,
amazing.
making sure I ate, making sure, are you in pain? Are you feeling okay? Do you want me to? I
Hmm.
remember with Amari, they were like, do you want me to keep him in the nursery so you can get some sleep? It's okay. You don't have to feel bad, because they knew I was probably feeling bad. I was like, take that baby that nursery so I can sleep for 2 hours. I could not
Yep.
imagine, and nurses should get so much more. Um, just they should get much more. Just, you know, just recognition for what they do.
I love this dialogue. You know, I'm eating it up. That's why I'm just quiet. I'm like, yes.
I wonder why.
Give it to me. You know, first and foremost, I really do have to say a big thank you to Dr. Shah for, like Jillian said, making a lot of your research and just shining a light on the relationship between nurses and doctors. Because while it's an interdisciplinary relationship, it's a very, very vital role to patient survival, great outcomes, you know, and sorry, I have to say this, but I've been a nurse for 12 years and I have often been on the end of not being appreciated, being devalued for my role. And I'm talking while I'm working, from, you know, interactions with different physicians or surgeons. And, you know, it's very refreshing to see someone of your stature say that this relationship is very important, because you're right. We are the ones who are having the majority of the contact with the patient. You know, you're relying on us for assessment, you're relying on us for communication. I mean, it's just so much, but for some reason it seems it's viewed as not important. You know what I mean? It's almost like the role of the teacher, whereas they're making the human beings for tomorrow, but it's
Well,
like,
and look at
you know
what
what I mean?
has happened in COVID, that nurses and teachers and the frontline health workers have gotten the recognition that
It's been exposed. So I'm grateful, you know, not for our institutions being overwhelmed, but just for this becoming the forefront, becoming a part of the forefront and the conversation. So I'm so grateful. But I wanted to go back to something you said, Dr. Shah, about a woman's experience in the hospital, and you mentioned, you know, Serena Williams, and how it's treated as it's a luxury of some sorts for you to be treated with some dignity and value. So I wanted to ask you, how does the current medical landscape devalue and take away the dignity of women who choose to have children?
Well, that's a good question, Sonora. I mean, it's our expectations in childbirth collectively are so low. You know, like I've literally at this point delivered probably tens of thousands of babies, or help deliver. I catch, like, it's the mom who delivers, right? But it's the
yeah.
but when you think about what we subject people to, I mean, if most moms walk out of the hospital with an alive baby, they're happy. That's the bar. But people have goals other than emerging unscathed from the process, right? Like, we started the conversation talking about mortality. Like, surviving childbirth is the floor of what people deserve. We should be aiming for the ceiling. And the fact that we haven't even defined like what the actual ideal is, that people deserve not just safety, but they deserve to be empowered, to be supported. And fundamentally, we failed by not making those explicit goals and attending to it, and making the expectation that if your baby has the right number of fingers and toes, like, you're supposed to be all good.
I just want one question. I've been reading a lot about lotus births, and is that an option for a woman when she has a C-section?
I don't see why not.
Okay.
I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure if it helps, but it doesn't hurt. But I think that's the other thing, like, it's not up to me. Like, that's your placenta.
Right.
So,
right. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Rial, you have next one?
So Dr. Shah, so with all of this said, and especially for our listeners, what do you think are some of the best defenses, particularly for Black women, in order for us to combat maternal health disparities, because we are knowledgeable of the risk? And so how can we educate ourselves or prepare ourselves? Because we still want to have children. We know the statistics, we know what's up against us, but what are some things that can help us?
Well, it's really important to acknowledge that it shouldn't be up to Black women to save themselves and everybody else. Like, all of us have work to do.
Please say it again.
Yeah. I'm over here like, hallelujah. Thank you.
Please say it one more time.
It's not like, I don't want to start the conversation with like, Black women need to educate themselves. I mean, like, that Nina Martin article, that ProPublica article about Shalon Irving, the CDC intelligence officer who studied maternal health for a living and died in childbirth. The whole point, I think that the heartbreaking title of that article is that nothing protects Black women, right? Like, she was educated. The solution is not to educate yourself more, but it doesn't mean that you can't do something. So I think, there are structural things that we need to fix. We need to have more providers that look like the people that they're serving. But all of us, regardless of what our identity is, I think what we need is systems to make sure that the things that should be discussed during every labor assessment, every prenatal visit, every time are actually discussed, and that people that are responsible for delivering care are accountable to making sure that they happen. I know that seems really abstract, but we need systems. We need to value communication and teamwork the same way that we value the hemorrhage protocol or how to dose a medication. Communication is not a soft skill, it is what saves lives. And I think the end of the communication that comes down to, the person who's pregnant, whether she's Black or not, but particularly if she's Black, I mean, if you don't feel like you're being heard, keep at it. And the line that would work with a person like me, I'm not a Black woman, but I am an obstetrician. I can tell you what would make my ears perk up. Mm-hmm. If you said to me, I know this might seem really normal for you, right? Because think about it, for the obstetrician, most of their job is to tell you that I know you're really uncomfortable, but it's fine. Like, that is our job.
Right.
That's our job. Mm-hmm. So like, you need to punch through that, not punch, you need to like break through that barrier mm-hmm. and be like, I know this seems really normal to you, but this does not feel normal to me and I'm scared. If somebody said that to me, I would like pump the brakes, and I think that could make a difference. So
okay. Thank you. That is actionable advice that we can take and utilize. Absolutely. And hopefully our listeners feel the same way too. Dr. Shah, I'd like to, on behalf of the entire Tribe Called Fertility team, thank you once more for joining us as our guest today. It was truly enlightening, truly appreciate it. And we know that, this is just the beginning of this conversation, which will continue for a lot longer. Please tell our listeners how they can find you on social media, if you are active on social media, or where they can find you otherwise.
Yeah, I am on social media. So I'm on Twitter. It's Neel, NEEL_Shah. I'm on Instagram. And I like to use those platforms to share what I'm thinking and share my, dog and toddler pictures. So welcome to connect that way, or really any way, but mostly just thank you so much for the platform you've created to have these really important conversations. It's so inspiring, like 3 friends from growing up, getting together around this, and it's just really powerful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you come back.
Yes.
Anytime.
You have to come back, Dr.
Thank
Shah.
you so much.
I would do anything that Dr. Jill Baker told me to do.
Yay!
That's awesome. Awesome.
More information on your amazing podcast hosts, please visit www.atribecalledfertility.com. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review us. It really helps the show, and we welcome the feedback. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so that you know when we're dropping new content.